Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod, but this one is a very, very special one because we are back in Dubai and we have a very, very special guest. But before I begin, as always, you should know the drill by now. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and if you're on YouTube, hello YouTube, don't forget to click on the subscribe button if I can get the words out. Bell notification, our episodes come out every Tuesday. So today we're going to be talking about building your personal brand with our very special guest, Nicki Bedford. Hi Nikki.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm so well.
I've known Nikki since the last time I came to Dubai back in May, and we built our friendship and our professional relationship all the way through that. And you have an amazing story to kind of tell as well in terms of your career journey and what you're doing right now. What I'm going to say to our listeners is this is a sneak peek, an insight that you're probably rarely going to get. Usually when you're looking at people who've already been out there and done it, you see the full journey, but what you're going to get is someone who's at the start of the journey, who's already A/B and testing. So you're going to get a real insight from the horse's mouth, as they say, in terms of what's going on. So enough about that, enough about me. Nikki, tell the audience who you are. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'd love to, and thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I think I'll start by giving you a bit of a snapshot of my career, of sort of where I've come from. I've essentially been in media, tech, advertising industry my whole career, starting in print, then moved into sort of events, worked in radio, TV, and then moved into the online space, and then social media. And more recently, my role was head of region across Asia Pacific at Buzzfeed, based out of Sydney, which was, pretty much a dream for me to be in that role. I'd always loved working my way up the corporate ladder, and I'd always seen myself within a corporate position within a corporate company. In fact, about 2 years ago, I was talking to Buzzfeed about my next step, which would have seen me move to New York, which, if you know me, I love New York, and it's always been a dream for me to move to New York. And at the same time I was having that conversation, out of nowhere, I was approached by a CEO at a social media startup based in Dubai, and they gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse. I accepted, and I found myself in Dubai 5 weeks later, and I was like, okay, let's do this.
Fantastic.
I was in that role for about a year before realizing I just need to do things on my own. I actually went through a huge transition period in my personal life. I broke up with my husband of 7 years and decided to quit my job with nothing to go to. And so in that moment, I pretty much completely fell apart. Took some months to rebuild, and then, I went traveling and whatnot. And when I came back, I was like, all right, the time is now. I'm absolutely going to do what I want to do. I have always been passionate about women, firstly within the corporate space, because that's where I've come from. I come from a family I've got one sister, so my parents have two girls, and my dad very much treated me like the boy of the family, like I was his son, and he would speak to me as if I was a boy. And so from a corporate sense, he was always like, you deserve a seat at the table, you need to be fearless. Every time I was talking about, oh my gosh, like she said this, Dad's like, shut up and worry about the bigger picture. It's not important. And so I built this huge backbone. But what I also found was I moved through the corporate space with a lot of confidence, and I was always told that I was very fearless. And so I did notice other women within the corporate realm that weren't as confident. And it's all for me to do with mindset in a lot of instances. And so it's a big passion of mine, and it's something that I wanted to do something on my own. And so 5 months ago, She Leads the Way was born. Yeah.
So you're the founder of She Leads the Way.
I am.
So tell us a bit about She Leads the Way.
Yes. So She Leads the Way. She Leads the Way it's a media company and a podcast, and we celebrate essentially business leaders, entrepreneurs, and women trailblazers from all walks of life. We started as a podcast, developing into a media company, and also a educational marketplace for women who want to become entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So
that's brilliant. I mean, I've been following and listening to your podcast for a while. I've got 5 sisters, so no competition but I'm the youngest of 7. And one of my sisters who, and I'm transparent with this, and sorry, I'm not going to say her name, but she, suffered with bipolar and depression, and I actually passed on some of your podcast talk to it. So anyone who's out there, I highly recommend listening to She Leads the Way. It's really, really great insight and elements. But you've built a personal brand.
Yes.
And I always say there's 2 different types of brands to kind of build. I'm trying to build Mr. Bobble Pod, and elements like that to build my personal brand to align that with Bobble Digital, hence the t-shirt. But I always say, is it just individual or can it be business when it comes to building your personal brand?
That's such a good question. And I think it has certainly changed, I would say, over the last couple of years, or at least over the last 5 years. If you have a company, it's really important these days that you have a personal brand and that your personal brand is tied into the company, because people these days are buying into you and what you're selling. A couple of years ago, companies could sell products and they could sell a couple of Facebook ads and it would be okay. These days, there is just so much saturation, so much competition. It's really important that you're able to differentiate yourself, and people do that by building trust and loyalty with you. So I feel like now is the time to double down on your personal brand, both for yourself and naturally also for your company.
Yeah, we do this. We advise the same things for our clients in the same ways, like, I've mentioned this in a few podcasts now, brand versus performance.
Yes.
Brand isn't just putting your brand out there, it's having some level of humanization. It's showing how you connect with your customers at their level, their interest, their brands. For example, we support the Rainforest Trust. It's something that I'm passionate about personally.
Yeah.
In terms of when the Amazon was on fire and they said the lungs of, the world of Earth is on fire. And I was like, well, we shouldn't be cutting and replacing. We should be preventing.
Yeah.
And creating more like farming, tree farming, as opposed to cutting down actual where wildlife and animals live. Let's just, if you can regrow, just cut down the ones you're regrowing instead of cutting down new forest lands. And that's gone part of the ethics and elements of our brand. But you have to build a personal brand. You're right. People buy into people as much as they do yourself. And there's so much competition out there. How do you differentiate yourself in that specific way? So you're on a journey, you're building a personal brand, and I want the audience who's listening and watching to understand where you are right now. So why is it that digital marketing is probably one of the best platforms? We were outside talking about doing some stuff on social media and different elements. But when it comes to digital marketing, why is that one of the best platforms to build your personal brand with?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, I'll start with personal branding. It is a reflection or a demonstration of your experience as well as who you are. And then personal branding is the demonstration of the value that you can bring to the world. So when it comes to digital marketing, it's really important to think about, well, you want to be able to be in front of the people in the places where they're spending most of their time. And 80, 85%, 90% of the world is obviously online. And so that becomes very important. Beyond that, being online or on social media for your personal brand is important because you're able to engage directly with the end consumer. You're able to engage with them, interact with them directly. It's a way for you to demonstrate who you are firsthand. You can get on quickly and be like, hi, this is me. People are able to get a sense of who you are and then why they would want to buy from you. But beyond that, you're also able to pivot really quickly based on the feedback that you're getting from people in real time. So you've never been able to develop your personal brand quicker than on social media because people are seeing you day to day in real time.
But what about, our listeners are very like SME, small business micros. When we talk about them about building a personal brand, doing some branding or anything on social media, they think time, effort, retainer. They think, where's the content going to come from? Who's going to create it? It is a cost. If you then outsource that work to somebody, they're going to charge you a significant fee. Obviously, you get what you pay for ultimately, but what would you say to them where they just see it as a cost?
Oh, if they only see it as a cost?
Yeah, because smaller businesses don't have the budgets bigger businesses have. Like, we're an agency, we know the value of building our personal brand, and me building my personal brand. You're on the journey of building a personal brand as you founded, the podcast She Leads the Way and the media company behind that. What would you say to them? Why it's important?
Well, I would say 2 things to this. The first thing, in terms of cost, it's important to understand exactly where you're spending your money across other platforms and mediums as well. It becomes incredibly important if you know that you're going to get in front of the right people. But beyond that, being able to create your personal brand can be done organically as well. If you know that you have the ability to target your direct consumer on a platform by spending X amount and then knowing that you're going to get that return on investment, wouldn't you do it? It's something that you need to invest in order to get the return. It's just a no-brainer. You can start doing things like that organically, but you can also start building out audience pools based on the people that are engaging your content, and then it won't cost as much every single time you do it.
Yeah.
But I believe it is one space that you should be spending money because it's important. People are there, and it's a way of getting ahead of other competition.
Yeah, I would say to anyone who's listening to business thinking, well, it's all good and easy to say that, but when people are going through, let's say back in the UK, there's a lot of businesses struggling right now financially, and they don't have their own time resources. You've got to vet, the companies or the people, or you've got to watch people who are doing it, and which is what we're going to go on to the next stage of the podcast, is going through your journey in terms of what you're doing to build your personal brand. You need to follow these kind of people, or if you're going to go out to an agency, do your due diligence. Don't just go based on price. Go for, if you are going to invest your money into someone, do they have a proven track record of delivering the outcome you want to achieve? Don't just go for, let's Google a local agency and the prices.
You're talking about agency, not you're talking
a bit of both, because they have to do it themselves, but a lot of companies don't have the time or knowledge resources, and we'll go through that shortly. But then there's also the element of working with others to do it for you. What is your process? You've worked with some big brands before. We talked about Buzzfeed. What have you learned that you can share with the audience in terms of building your personal brand?
Yeah, of course. So for me, the process is always typically the same. And that is, you think about, okay, first of all, you go bigger picture, break it into chunks, and then you work backwards. So, and this is similar to whether you're working towards personal brand or if you're working towards executing on a campaign. If we're talking about personal brand, for me, and what I did was I thought about, well, what do I want to be known for? But even smaller chunks is, what are 3 words that I would describe myself and the brand? So, for example, I'm trying to think what were my 3 words? I think it was like energetic, positive, which I have that in spades, smart and fun. And so everything that I did, because those 3 words or 4 words or whatever words encompass who I am and will be a reflection of the brand. It does differ depending on what brand you have. Like for me, it is very much centered around, the personal brand is very, very important versus if it's a different sort of business or like finance, for example, where you've got a different angle. But for me, being anchored in those words and making them lead the way in a sense is incredibly important. I'll give you an example. When I first started, I was experimenting and I thought, I'm going to do Dance Fridays. A lot of people it doesn't really why would you do that? It's sort of weird. But for me, it was fun. I am fun. That is a representation of me and myself and my brand. And I wanted that to come through. And so I just started doing it without necessarily knowing how it tied, other than the fact that I liked it. And, it tied because it's been such a big week. Let's Dance Fridays and get ready for the weekend. When I started to do that, people really resonated with it in a funny way. In fact, people like that more than they were saying they like the podcast. Sometimes I'm like I would get messages on Friday saying Dance Fridays hasn't launched yet. And I'm like, but the podcast has. Yeah. So if you could tune in, that would be great. But it's just sometimes it's just really important to understand what you stand for in your personal brand. Yeah. And then do things that align with that.
All right, fantastic. So you're building and your focus right now is She Leads the Way. And we had this conversation a few days ago because you were a bit concerned, well, would they well listen to this? But I reiterate, it's hearing it from the horse's mouth, getting that insight straight away in terms of someone who's on the journey, because there's so many people out there right now that are probably thinking about building a personal brand that are just too scared to take that step. Now we've got someone here on the podcast who's at the process of taking that step, hasn't taken 100 steps all the way down, but has taken the first few steps. So your insight, what you're going to share now, is going to be absolutely amazing, I think, for our audience in terms of like, so at the start of the journey, what challenges would you say you faced so far in the last 5 months?
What challenges? Oh my gosh, I have a bucket load. I think the biggest challenge for me was the difference of moving from corporate into being a founder. That difference is so vast. Coming from, you know, the security of being within an organization and knowing exactly what success looked like, and then moving in and doing your own thing where essentially success differs and changes every day in a sense. The biggest challenge for me the biggest challenge initially was just, what is this supposed to represent?
Yeah.
You know, I know why I'm here. I know why I'm doing it, but what is it actually going to look like? And so the biggest piece of advice I would give is to just do it. I'm an executor. So people either thrive as a strategist or being incredibly strategic or being great at executing. You can be great at both, but and I'm pretty good at strategy, but in terms of execution, that is my sweet spot. And what I mean by that is I will just get up and go and do it. So if I think, oh my gosh, that's a good idea, I'm going to do it and figure it out later. So when I thought I'm going to do She Leads the Way, and I had thought about She Leads the Way a couple of years ago, but never did anything with it because I had other priorities. But when I had decided I'm doing She Leads the Way, everything fell into place within weeks. And then next minute I was recording my first episode, and it all happened within the space of a couple of weeks. And the biggest challenge for me was being okay with things not being 100% okay. When I was starting to post things on Instagram, I always had a team that did that. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, do you know what I mean?
That is so true. Like, so many people come up to me because I work in digital marketing, and even my mate was like, can you do some stuff on my wedding and create some reels and stuff? I was like, I know mine and my company look great, but somebody else does that for me. I was like, but I can bring them and they can do it. But it's like you forget because you're so strategically or execution focused. Yeah.
So it's just, and then when you're seeing the fruits of your work on the page, I'm like, oh my God, this looks awful. Like it's just, but I thought to myself, it doesn't need to look okay right now because it's so much easier refining than being too perfectionistic and not getting something out. If you start seeing, oh, okay, then you can rectify and think, oh, actually, I want to do this, or I want to change this, or this needs to be, or this is the flow. Then you start building out your content calendar. And, you know, now I look at it and I'm much more proud of where it was. I mean, I'm only 5 months in, so we're very, very fresh. We're in the absolute build phase, but it's just about getting it out there.
Yeah, I love this quote from Tron, you know, Legacy. If anyone watched the film, you know I love my film quotes.
I know.
Just go straight over your head.
I would have no idea what you're talking about.
He goes, you can't chase perfection. It's unknowable, but it's right there in front of you the whole time as well. And he didn't know that at the start. But
what, Tron said that?
Yeah, well, the guy in Tron, I know. It's a hashtag Disney. But, you know, at least we credited you, Disney. If you're mentioning the podcast, don't want to get sued. How are you dealing with those challenges? Because there's so many things you've had to go through, because you've had to learn, and I know this because I'm 6 years into Bobble, I'm 3 years into my podcast.
Yes.
You're 5 months in, you're building a personal brand, you're building a media company behind that. A lot of challenges are coming a different way.
Yes.
How are you dealing with that without having that security of being in a corporate world and teams around it?
I actually am just trying to smile. I actually am really, really enjoying the process. Yeah. The one thing that I've taken away is, you know, when you see these inspirational quotes and videos and whatever on Instagram and it's always really enjoy the journey. Like you really have to, I really am enjoying the journey. I'm only 5 months in and I'm learning more than I ever thought that I would need to learn. I thought coming into this that I've run a business before, right? Yeah. I know what I'm doing. It's just not the case.
Goes out the window, doesn't it?
It just goes out the window. So I just feel like I'm almost at kindergarten working my way back up through the ranks, and I'm really enjoying that. there are some times where I wake up and I'm like, I am useless.
Yeah.
But other days I'm like, this is why I'm doing this. Like, I've got it. And I just feel like it's being able to sort of run through the ups and downs. It can be challenging, especially when you came from a space where I felt like I was extremely competent, had a great reputation in a company, and now I'm sort of not building up the reputation or personal brand from scratch, but building a business from scratch. So it's just having a different perspective.
So how are you managing different things that you're trying right now? So someone who's listening to this podcast, we think, right, on a journey, come from corporate, now personal brands, dealing with challenges, but what are you doing? You talked about previously you doing Dance Fridays to build your brand product. What other things are you doing? Are you A/B testing? Give us a little bit of a flavor insight in terms of what you're actually doing.
Welcome to my mind. Jump on in.
Yeah.
So for me, it's incredibly forward planning is very, very important to me.
Yeah.
So I like to ensure that I'm at least 2 to 3 months ahead of my content calendar to make me feel like I'm on track, so that if things move out, then I know that I'm doing the right thing. So at the moment, I'm launching 1 episode every single week. So I will record the show at Myco and in the studio at Myco. And then that'll be 1 episode. I'll do 2 to 3 reels from that that I'll launch every week. Beyond that, I've got Dance Fridays on Friday. I also like to incorporate educational pieces. So things like, a wrap up of people's favorite books.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to create more day in the lifestyle content. I say one of my biggest challenges, I'll go back to that, is the fact that when I launched She Leads the Way, my initial intention wasn't to have me as the face of it, although I mean, it's obvious that it should be that way. But I actually struggled with that a little bit. I wanted to be steering the ship without my face on the, front of it.
You're all right. You got a pretty face in me, and I still have to put my face in front of the podcast.
But that's confronting. Having to. So anyway, I'm trying to figure out ways of leveraging, my personality, so people can understand who I am, why I'm doing this, and the women that we have.
Yeah.
So process is important. Making sure that you're creating content that works. The content that we're creating that is consistent right now is ensuring that I've got the podcast episodes and cut downs, the Dance Fridays, but then I'm also trying to make sure that I've got areas that I can just test and learn to see what the audience resonates with. That's the most important thing. And that's hard because I'm not a content creator.
No, you can't expect if you do something it's going to go viral or anything like that. You've got to A/B test.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
You've got to figure out. Exactly.
So what advice would you give to someone else who's just starting out like you? To someone who's basically 5-6 months where you were.
Okay. Well, firstly, welcome. Great to have you here. It's a wild ride. The biggest piece of advice is to embrace your uniqueness.
Yeah.
I believe that everyone has such an individual skill set or personality or tone of voice. And sometimes people get too caught up in what their competitors are doing or what they think they should be doing, or if they see some. Just, and to a degree, you need that market knowledge.
Yeah.
But being true to yourself, being authentic, it's been said before, but you are so unique that all of the answers are within you. So if you're ever worried that one day you're like, I just don't know what I'm doing, then just go the lowest hanging fruit. What feels right to you right now? Like what is it that your personality wants to show? What is it that you want to tell the world, and try and lead with that? And
sometimes you get lost. Yeah. And I saw, I think, on Joe Rogan's podcast. I can't remember the name of the book. He goes, he's walking with a horse in the forest, and the horse goes, "Can you see your next step? Just take that."
Yeah.
And sometimes it will get difficult when you're starting out, and you just have to take the next step. Yeah. Can you see that? What does that look like? My advice would be to anyone is just A/B test. There's no right formula. There's no science to it. You can learn as much about social media, digital marketing algorithm, whether it's Google, social media, posting. But ultimately, unless you don't do what you just said, which is bring your personality to the forefront, bring out who you are, people follow brands and celebrities or influencers or listen to podcasts because of the individual.
Yeah.
And don't get hooked up about, I say, the engagement or impressions. For you, it's important because you're building a media company, you're building a podcast where your future revenue will come from that audience base. But it depends what sector you're in. So for me, I don't really get bogged down to how many views we get on YouTube, because I see a lot of streams on Spotify and Apple Podcasts in the thousands. So I know, people tend to view it, listen to it more than watch it more. And as long as you can see consistent growth over time, you're doing the right things. Look at where the spikes of growth come from, to go back and analyze that data, say, well, actually, why did I get more engagement on this social post or this podcast or this specific topic or this snippet of podcast that I pushed out on social media or this specific dance that I did on Friday? What was it about that? And then bring it forward in new ways. I think a lot of what people do in terms of content is a lot of it is repeating the process a little, as best as you can. We're nearly out of time, and I wish I could keep talking to you all day, because I know there's so much insight and advice you can provide to our listeners. But if there's one piece of advice that you want our listeners and our viewers to walk away from today that they should focus on, what would that be and why?
Well, I think that the biggest one for me is to just do it without even worrying about what the outcome is, because the outcome will come. Success is on the other side of fear. If you just do it, then you're one step ahead of anyone that hasn't done it.
Yeah, you're already ahead by even thinking about it. You're already one step ahead. My advice would be I'm trying to build a personal brand. I'm not at the same level as yourself, but analyze what's working, not working, and just try it. Just, if you think it's a bad idea, more often than not, the bad idea is more likely to work better than the idea you think is good. Don't overthink it. Don't get into your headspace. Don't let your thoughts take over. Just do it. #Nike. Don't want to get told off for that. So if you're going to just get on with it and let the results speak, make sure you have enough creative ideas to go after it, and look at other people that are doing it. So my advice would be, if you're trying to build a personal brand, here's someone who's 6 months down into the journey. You should be looking at the last 6 months of content that Nikki's created and what she's doing, and follow that if you need someone as a guidance or elements from that.
Call me if you want to chat. I'm more than happy to chat.
Yeah. I don't know if that would work for you, how many phone calls you'll get.
1-800 call me.
Sounds like one of those old school American adverts now. So that wraps up Bobble Pod. Thank you, Nikki, for joining us. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest. If you haven't subscribed or listened to the She Leads the Way podcast, I suggest you do that now. And I also want to give a big shout out to Maiko, who allowed us to be in the offices to record this podcast, and we'll be tagging them in as well. So thank you for that. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. If you're watching or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and send us more questions. We've done a lot of podcasts in the past where I've talked about some detailed things, and they've been really, really good. So at Bobble Digital, #Mr. Bobble, #AskBobble, and #Bobble Pod. You know the drill. See you on the next episode.
Bye.